Hey cadets, the year is almost over, which means I should probably do another video. It has been a long time in between videos, and for that, I thank you for your patience. Pancake and I are ecstatic to not only bring you an original work, but one that was written completely by me and with no outside help, or ghostwriter, whatever that means, whatsoever. Not even a single word, so don't look into it. You would be wasting your time anyway. There is zero chance that Nate Nelson worked on this, so don't ask him. Anyways, I figured since you were good this year, you deserved more than one story. If you stay around until the end, there's my second ghost story after this. I'm saving my third for its own video since it's kind of long, the best one I have, and the last encounter with an unnatural presence that I cannot explain. Without further to say, I'm just going to have to start the story.
There he is, inches away, his jaw resting on the table, his eyes open and bulging, but not moving, never moving. Blood is running down his cheeks, soaking into his month-old beard and staining the white vinyl an ugly pink. His face is clean. The blood runs in trails, avoiding his nose, lips, and cheekbones altogether, framing his features in a wreath of black. His eyes stare at me through the darkened room, and I am again reminded of the feeling I've lost. The thrill I once could conjure with the swing of an axe or the stab of a knife. This man gapes at me, his eyes colorless in the absence of light, and seems to ask if it was worth taking his life. Did you have a good time? His clenched jaws seem to whisper. Did widowing my wife do something for you? The answer, of course, is no. It did nothing for me. Then again, I hadn't expected it to. From the moment I selected this man, to the hours I spent following him at a distance, learning his patterns, and choosing my hour, I knew that ending his life would stir nothing in my soul except the meekest sense of foreboding and a shadow of defeat. Number 13 this man is. The 13th human being robbed of its life by my hands, and so far the biggest. In a time now past when my victim was able to stand on two legs of his own accord, he measured over 6 feet tall. He was muscled, too. I had seen him coming and going from the gym, entering in his business casual attire and exiting covered in sweat in a sleeveless spandex shirt that displayed impressive arms and shoulders the size of bowling balls. The last man to die at my hands had been strong, bigger, and more powerful than me. But he was slow and clumsy, his muscles getting in the way of his movements. This new man, the one whose eye is slowly drifting away from its mate as rigor mortis stiffens his body, I believed he would become my match. No matter how fast I was or how deft with a knife, this man's strength could easily overcome my own abilities. I was wrong, and now he is dead. It wasn't like this in the beginning. In my genesis, when I first felt the thrill like a static shock at my fingertips, when the human race had turned in my mind from 7 billion faceless bystanders to 7 billion victims just waiting for their turn. I'd held none of the cynical, depressive thoughts I now experience. I was afraid. Afraid of being discovered, afraid of being caught in the act, but that fear only enhanced the thrill, only reminded me that I alone was capable of such beautiful depravity. The fear I experience now is less situational and less earthly. More of a terror, really, an underlying virus in the back of my head that will never let me truly forget what I cannot undo. But oh, it was almost worth it. I can almost believe that eternal misery is a good price to pay for the thrill I used to feel, not only when I saw the light vanish from their eyes or felt the warmth of their last breath on my face, but every moment leading up to that as well. From the discovery to the selection to the stalking, and the trailing moments after every climax, when my elation would slowly deplete as I searched for the next face I would watch lose its hope of seeing tomorrow. And, always smarter, always more elusive, I found them. Hours upon hours of due diligence would give me a firm idea of their intelligence, of their wariness, of their likelihood to survive a visit from yours truly. Early on, I was more afraid of them than they were of me. I would choose the weakest, separate the chaff, and have my fun. But the period of thrill grew shorter each time, as I tried to ignore what I had become, lazy and predictable, and a seeker of cheap fun. So I tried harder. I pushed myself, and I tracked down the ones who were prepared, the ones who would put up a fight. The thrill grew more intense with every attack, every moment when I believed I would be the one to lose the struggle and my life. Once caught up in the high of pushing past my boundaries of fear, I even went too far, to a place where the thrill was overshadowed by genuine dread. In that moment, I believed the end had come for me, but I experienced no peace, no overwhelming calm at the thought. I stared death in the eyes, as I now lock eyes with a corpse, and discovered a terror too deep, too profound to even consider. The memory returns, and I stand up to push it away. The dead man hasn't moved, but he seems less significant from this angle. His gaping eyes and rigid jawline are hidden from me beneath a head of matted brown hair, stained black by shadows and blood. The axe is still buried in his skull, only an inch deep, but held in place by the force I used to put it there. I was stupid, I thought. An attack from the rear was not necessary to prove myself. Even before my revelation, when the thrill was my lifeblood, I would likely have waited for the man to realize he was trapped and turn to face his pursuer. I preferred to stare into their eyes as it happened. My revelation. I move across the darkened room to stand at the counter, leaning on the tile with my gloved hands. Through the window over the sink, I can see a small square of light. A window in the next house. Silhouettes moving around inside. Before, I would have closed the blinds or even crouched to sneak below the windowsill. But now I stand at the sink, face fully exposed to the night. If a neighbor took this opportunity to walk across their shared backyard, I would be seen. My face, now splattered in blood, is not an unusual face, but quiet terror has a way of enhancing the memory. If I were set upon by the law here, and now, I would make short work of the scene. The axe would glide smoothly out of the man's head towards one of the black-clad officers, fast enough to be convincing, but slow enough that their magazines would be empty before the blade connected. I have considered the possibility of shedding my gloves and leaving my identity open to find, with the quick dusting of fingerprint powder and a glance around the crime scene. It would be easy and quick, and finally put an end to this insane dance in which I've trapped myself. Yet, based on nothing but a feeling, my own intuition into unearthly laws, I cannot equate death at the hands of law enforcement with death at the hands of a potential victim. In short, the police knew what they were signing up for. The man with the axe in his head did not. It didn't used to be this way. I remember casting my eyes towards the black drain in the middle of the stainless steel pit. Before, I wasn't concerned with the alleged laws, these metaphysical rules I've arbitrarily laid out for myself. Back then, it was about the victims and the thrill. But the thrill had deserted me, just as every living being with whom I've attempted an emotional relationship. In the moment when I needed the thrill most of all, I found myself with nothing but fear. I can still picture her, all this time later, with her honey gold hair and sun-kissed skin. She was a gym rat, just like the man on the table, and every day I would watch her coming and going. Coming, she wore a light jacket over her workout gear. Going, she wore only a cropped exercise shirt that showed off her taut, muscled arms, her biceps and shoulders bigger and possibly stronger than mine have ever been. There was always a smile on her face when I saw her. She smiled at the checkout line from the grocery store, and she smiled as she picked up her children from school, and she smiled when she did yoga in her backyard. The one time I managed to sneak a glimpse through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her gym, I saw her at the head of a group, leading them in a kickboxing class they had signed up for, a smile lighting up her face. Easy, I thought. She would be easy. The one before her had been a man, a heavy and well-balanced man who had fought hard, but this time I didn't care how easy it would be. I wanted to take her down, to stop those muscled arms from ever throwing another punch, and to turn her lovely smile into a grimace. For good. Months of obsession went by before, and she was left alone in her house, an expensive two-story affair across the tracks from where I was living at the time. Back then, I took precautions. I wore a mask. I blackened the skin around my eyes. I had taken care of the family dog while she was teaching PTA mothers how to kick and punch, so I wouldn't have to worry about external forces giving away my presence. Watching her closely for such a long time, I determined she would fight back. She was a master at her sport, proficient enough to instruct others for a living, but still, I underestimated her. I was fast and held a splitting maul. I had the added reach of my weapon, and the blade would make short work of her smooth, tanned skin. On impulse, I opened the dead man's cupboard and selected a coffee mug. It's white, with a painting of a blue turtle carrying a glass of beer on its shell, and the caption, "Have a Guinness when you're tired." Thinking of my revelation of the woman with the honey gold hair and the blue eyes has dried out my throat. And as the dead man stares into oblivion behind me, I fill the mug from his sink and swallow the lukewarm water. I made a rookie mistake, not plotting my path towards her. I tripped on something, probably some child's toy, abandoned in the hallway, and gave up any hope I had of surprising her. The woman jumped up from the table, her trademark smile gone and a gape of terror in its place. I stepped into the kitchen, weighing the axe in my hands, covering my lost subtlety with enough feigned confidence to drive any hope out of her. But the woman wasn't petrified. She had trained, and trained others, for this situation, and before I had taken 2 steps into the kitchen, she began pelting me with dishes from the rack behind her. Plates, mugs, glasses, even silverware. I raised a hand to protect my face, catching a glimpse of red running down her arm where she had blindly grabbed at a knife. Through this unplanned turn of events, my confidence did not waver. I could feel the thrill running through me, revving up for another glorious climax. I pushed on, slowed by the assault of ceramics, stopped every few seconds as something would slam into my skull. She was too far away to do serious damage, but I would pause and see white behind my barely open eyelids. I had made it across the kitchen when she ran out of ammunition, and in my renewed confidence, I took too long opening my eyes and regaining my surroundings. With the sound of a drawer slamming, my hand opened involuntarily, and a split second later, I felt pain lightening through my veins as warm red ran down my arm. My axe fell to the floor as I stumbled back, clutching the open wound pouring from my wrist. The flaps of skin were even, perfectly straight, a surgeon's incision made by a panicked and terrified victim. The blood was everywhere. I saw with horror. If I didn't bandage my wrist soon, I would die. But there was no time to attend my injury. Contrary to everything I expected, my honey-haired victim didn't run. With a cry of fury and adrenaline, she launched herself at me, knees punching into my chest. For a moment, that felt like a dozen. I was weightless, hovering in space, my feet no longer touching the ground. Then, the pain in my wrist was drowned out by the roar of the tiles as they slammed into my skull. The woman was on top of me, her knees on my chest. We were similar in weight, but I could feel her bearing down on me. My lungs refused to pump, and I found myself choking for air. She leaned down, her hair tickling my face, and pressed her hands to my throat. At first, nothing changed. I was already struggling to breathe. But then, my gasps became wheezes, and I felt the rising panic of a drowning man. My vision grew dim, but still I could see her above me. her beautiful smile twisted into a grimace of angry determination, and her sparkling eyes glowing in fury. My mouth opened and closed, but nothing came through. No sounds, no oxygen, no pleas for mercy. The lights were on, yet the world was dark. I felt detached, like a drunk man trying to sleep as the room spins around him. The thought came to me then, for the first time in any significant context, and its message was almost enough to wake me from my daze. I was going to die. Or at least, it was possible for me to die, and very soon. Had I ever really known this? In all those years of stealing the lives of others, and feeling the thrill as I brushed against my own death in the struggle, had I ever truly known that there could be a moment when my heart failed to beat, and my veins grew cold? Death. The most significant element in my life, if such a claim weren't too ironic to make. I had surrounded myself with death, and now that it had come for me, I realized for the first time that I couldn't understand it. What would happen next? I wondered, as the woman's face began to blur. What would happen when I closed my eyes for good? Where would I be? Would I be punished? Would my depraved acts in this life lead into some form of eternal sadomasochistic torture, where he who dwells below the earth would earn that same beloved thrill by cruelly cutting me and killing me over and over until nothing? I had discovered the end of life, but there was no end to eternity, a total absence of hope. My victim, so stupid of me to assume that role on her behalf, must have shared my realization, because her features softened and her grip loosened for only a moment. She hesitated, unwilling to take a life, and in that moment of weakness I took hers. This was not murder, I realized, as I pushed her aside and grabbed that honey blonde hair, smashing her face into the wall until it made a bloody hole in the material. This was self-defense, was it not? She was attempting to kill me, so to save myself, I had to kill her back. I fill up the mug again and drink it down before sticking the cup in my coat pocket. None of my DNA will be found in this kitchen. It was a miracle that none was found in the woman's, even with all the cleaning I had done. I bandaged my wrist well enough, and eventually it healed, but I lost more than blood that night. I lost the thrill. I had stared death in its glittering blue eyes and realized that what awaited me on the other side was not worth any amount of earthly pleasure. I could continue experiencing the thrill for the rest of my natural life, but I could never enjoy it. Not truly. Knowing there was an otherworldly spirit waiting for me after death to use my soul as its own twisted thrill. Religion, of course, would be the natural place to turn, but the idea didn't sit right with me. Why should I believe someone else's arbitrary conception of the afterlife over my own? The woman had tried to kill me with her bare hands, but I could not believe she would be damned to hell for that. Not after she was killed herself. My mind is dark and twisted, I know. But is it so impossible to believe that if I myself were murdered, no matter what my intentions beforehand, that I might save myself from just a fraction of the torture that awaits me beyond the end? I have no hope of achieving eternal bliss or even atheistic nothingness. But do I, as a human being of sorts, not deserve to believe that even I can change? Again, I sit down at the table and lock eyes with the dead man. He barely put up a fight, I muse. Compared to the sun-kissed woman, this monolith of a man was less formidable than her dog. Appearances are deceiving after all. I'll have to try harder, I think. I'll have to change my technique to focus on my killer's actual abilities, rather than the simple fact of their bulk. Perhaps I can even track down another of my kind, one who has felt the thrill and might willingly end my life as I feign protest and fear. That, I think, would do the most good for my record, and land me closest to happiness in the world beyond. One of the man's eyes is now staring in a different direction than the other. I had to make it look real, I remind myself. But I didn't have to attack from behind.
Before this next video, I would like if you could give my friend the Horror Goo some love. He's one of those special people who will stream their games for you to enjoy over on Twitch. He's a really solid guy who just enjoys narration, gaming, world building, not noticing me in his windows, and streaming, as well as the occasional scary story. Send him some love, tell him it's for me. And now for that ghost story. It's not super long, but it was scary at the time. The only thing that bothers me is now it sounds a little silly, all things considered. Alright, cadets, let's roll the story.
This had occurred to me the same time as the previous story. I was in my late teens. My friend had come over to hang out, but being gigantic nerds, this meant we stayed up way too long, way too often, playing fighting games. I remembered wanting to show them the creepy shadow at the end of my hall. The hallway ended in a bathroom, and if you left the door open, a creepy shadow seemed to take up all the space. The shadow was about average height and had a stocky build. Wanting to show off the creepy shadow, I gathered all three of my friends in the hallway and turned off all the lights in the house. I remember pointing it out to them. One of my friends grew impatient with another and barked, "Move, dude, I can't see anything." The funniest thing ever was when the same friend that was called out spoke very timidly from the back of our little huddle. "I'm right here." Not a story filled with terror or dread, but a delightful one to share nonetheless.
Hey, if you made it this far, I'm pretty surprised. In fact, I'm downright impressed. While you're here, if you want to hit that subscribe button and the little bell to be notified of whenever I upload, whenever the hell that is, once hell freezes over or Christmas comes early, I'd be very appreciative. Before I go, I did have one little something I wrote especially for tonight, and I wanted to share it with you. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the void, the corporal was recording for the good girls and boys. Another one finished to bring you great fear. Happy holidays from me. I'll get you next year.